HotLanta, more like ColdLanta. We booked our trip in the fall thinking that the weather in late February would be comparable to our native Southern California climate. Rather, the low when most of us landed on the 21st was 19 degrees. The South is so unaccustomed to freezing temperatures that when I landed in Dallas for a layover, the temperature inside the airport was in the 40s, presumably because they had never felt the need to install heaters in the past. Climate change doomers were looking around with the big "I told you so" grin on their faces, while the rest of us, unprepared, started pulling clothes out of our luggage to layer up. I landed fourth. Q had gotten there a day prior so he could get a lay of the land and explore the icy tundra. His night was uneventful. Work, fighting off frostbite, a cold food delivery. Matt and Sammy were bumped up to Spirit First Class, the exit row, after Matt smooth-talked the gate agent. Upon touching down, I was groggy from a 4 a.m. wake-up and in-flight edibles, but the excitement carried me forward. I was planning on taking an Uber, but was pleasantly surprised to see the beautiful Marta sitting right there. She would drop me off downtown in about the same amount of time it would take me to ride in a car for only 20% of the cost. Downtown Atlanta felt like it was still in the midst of the pandemic. Despite being surrounded by skyscrapers, there were hardly any workers strolling about. The restaurants were sparse, and the people walking around didn't seem to be thriving. This is due to a few factors. The liveliness of the downtown is contingent on sporting events. The temperatures were near freezing, so people probably weren't keen to walk around unless necessary. Most of the businesses have moved to the livelier, sleeker, and upstarty Midtown a few miles north of downtown. Atlanta became the city it is today thanks to the 19th century railroads. It is on the southeastern border of the Appalachian Mountains, making it the southern pathway for the trains to make their way west from the original 13 colonies. Before the Europeans were there, the Muskogee and Cherokee called the land home, using the Peachtree Creek as the center of commerce. While I was exploring the downtown, it seemed like every road was called Peachtree Street. In the 19th century, Atlanta was an important strategic center for the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Following the war, during Reconstruction, the city emerged as a hub of progress. However, within a few decades, Jim Crow laws erased much of the progress made during Reconstruction. Despite this, positive change was happening on Auburn Avenue a little east of downtown. Sweet Auburn would become a thriving African-American neighborhood in the 20th century and the birthplace of Martin Luther King Jr. Today, Atlanta is a center of travel, culture, and commerce. It is one of the busiest airports in the entire world. The city has become a major center for the film industry, with numerous movie studios taking advantage of the tax incentives, lower production costs, and state-of-the-art facilities. This has attracted both the skilled workforce and aspiring actors to try their luck at Pinewood Atlanta Studios, Tyler Perry Studios, EUE, Screen Gem Studios, and several others. Back to the trip. I got off the train at 5 Points and walked toward our Airbnb, which was in one of the tallest skyscrapers overlooking Olympic Centennial Park. Sammy let me in because Matt was sleeping and Q was working out. The room was fantastic. Not only was it centrally located, but inside was luxurious and spacious. Full kitchen, huge television, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, huge 18th floor balcony overlooking the park, several stories taller than the Skyview Ferris wheel. Blake, you crazy bastard, you did well. We had a view of the Georgia Aquarium, the largest in the United States, the College Football Hall of Fame, the World of Coca-Cola Museum, and we were a 10-minute walk from Mercedes-Benz and State Farm Arena. The 4 of us walked through the frigid downtown to Tin Lizzy's, an American-style Mexican food joint. Q took a team's meeting as we walked through the bustling city, holding court as cars honked in the background. Tin Lizzy served its purpose, feeding 4 guys with vastly different palates and diet restrictions. Matt has IBS, Sammy's vegan, Q ordered a cheeseburger taco, I got a mediocre grains bowl and drank 3 tall beers. Andy met us as we were finishing up. It was all coming together. Lubed up and excited for the weekend ahead of us, we made our way up and down the hilly downtown in search of booze and nicotine. We stocked up and made it back to the room. I chugged Bud Lights and chain-smoked cigarettes on the balcony. At this point, my memory's a little foggy. I know we made it to a dingy sports bar called Hudson Grill where the food was cold and the beers were warm, but it provided us the sustenance we needed to make it through the night. We made it back to the apartment and I passed out just as I heard Blake making his triumphant entrance. Saturday morning was exciting. Everybody was here. Soja had pulled up on a red-eye and was ready to rally through the day. I needed to shake off the hangover, so I forced myself to go on a walk. The sun was shining and the wind had tapered to a moderate breeze. I walked through the desolate downtown, slightly worried about making a wrong turn, but once I made it east of the 85 freeway, things started to improve. Bungalows and Victorian-style houses lined Auburn Street. I asked a woman going into church if she thought I could use the restroom, and she pointed me to a visitor center around the corner. It turned out to be Martin Luther King Jr. National History Park and Museum. It was packed. All the stalls were full, so I just went pee and held my hungover poop. It was cool to see people showing out for a history museum on a Saturday morning. I continued east. I had been to Atlanta with my wife in 2017 and I remembered loving the Beltline and wanted to see if it was as cool as I remembered it. It was even better. It is one of the best urban walkways I've seen in all of America. No cars, tons of eating and drinking options, lots of joggers, families out for a stroll, weekend drinkers, dog walkers, bike riders, you name it. The planned Beltline is supposed to be an entire 11-mile loop around the heart of the city, but I only explored the east side of it from the Krog Street Tunnel to Piedmont Park. Blake called me and told me they were making their way to the Waffle House. It was not a meal I wanted to miss, so I hopped on one of those stupid bird scooters and made my way back downtown. The 7 of us squeezed into a 4-person booth. The food was great. Blake had the realization that a waffle and a pancake are essentially the same food but different shapes. The bill was under $100 for all 7 of us. We didn't have any concrete plans, so I proposed we head to the Beltline. On our way there, we walked by State Farm Arena and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We took a photo in front of the stadium, and a seemingly normal woman started hollering her approval, saying she loved us and we looked great. Initially, we thought she was somebody's quirky aunt, but once she started talking to us, it became clear she was a little kooky. She was holding a package, claiming she said she had been delivering it for an hour, and asked which of us was famous. Andy, being the most famous of us, took a photo with her. She pulled out a bottle of Hennessy, drooled a little, and started drinking. We said our goodbyes, and she gave us a pleasant smile and wave as we left. I suggested we go down to the MARTA station. It was completely deserted, except for one twacked guy who was staring at us and screaming. There were 7 of us, but none of us liked our odds if we had to go toe-to-toe with him. He had nothing to lose, and his screams were getting louder and angrier. Finally, the train arrived and took us about 1 of the 2 miles we needed to get to our destination. We disembarked and everybody downloaded the Bird app, and then we were 7 grown-ass men riding down the Atlanta streets on electric scooters. I was nervous that suggesting we head to the Beltline might have been a mistake, but I think everybody enjoyed it. We went to the Krog Street Market where we got beer. Sammy ordered a banh mi sandwich that looked delicious. Afterward, we got some coffee outside, people watched, and caught up with one another. We kept walking north, passing beautiful loft apartments, co-working spaces, photo studios, boutiques, and crowded bars and restaurants. Somebody suggested we go to the Painted Park restaurant in Inman Park. Inman Park was once a garden suburb in the early 1900s with grand Victorian houses and lush greenery. Wikipedia says that Inman Park was the first in-town neighborhood to gentrify in the 1970s after white flight. Today, it's a revitalized area with a hip and bougie feel. Big brunch culture. Being in the Painted Ladies felt like I was in an episode of Southern Charm. Beautiful people in their 20s and 30s with blowouts and wavy blonde hair, classic and preppy outfits, khakis, denim, and boots that were fashion over function. Meanwhile, I was musky with sweat, wearing a dirty hoodie, sweatpants, old sneakers, and a beanie I bought for $10 at a souvenir shop. Somehow, we snagged a table in the crowded bar where all 7 of us could comfortably sit and ordered a few rounds of drinks. Q had the fantastic suggestion that we go to an Atlanta FC game, and Soja had snagged us excellent seats. The whole city showed up for the game, packing out Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the season opener. The game was epic. Atlanta scored in the 41st minute, Montreal answered in the 47th, Atlanta scored again in the 63rd, and then Montreal tied it in the 71st. It was 2-2 in the 85th minute when Atlanta scored the go-ahead goal, keeping the game from going into extra time and clinching our moneyline bets. Our focus quickly shifted to watching the second half of the Lakers-Nuggets game. Luka Doncic had his best game as a Laker so far, and it's starting to look like the team is a serious championship contender. We capped the night off at the underwhelming Hudson Grill, where our server told us that the fries were off, then told us the cooks did end up making our fries, but she didn't bring them out to us for some reason. She just told us they were made. Sunday was the day we'd all been waiting for. Hawks vs Pistons. While everybody got ready, I went on another walk, this time through the historic Midtown district where I found some of the prettiest architecture I had seen since arriving. Huge wood-framed bungalows and Queen Anne-style homes, some single-family homes and some converted into apartments. Nearby, Piedmont Park offered a breathtaking urban green space where locals gathered to soak up nature in the confines of a concrete landscape. The trees were leafless, but it was easy to imagine how beautiful the park would be in the spring or fall. The rest of the crew was scattered. Some were lounging in Centennial Park, Q went to the Coca-Cola Museum, Andy made some content, Matt went to grab lunch with his cousin. I stopped by Georgia Tech, impressed by the large college campus right in the middle of the busy city. Some students were enjoying their weekend, playing frisbee on the Great Lawn or cheering on the baseball and track teams. Conversely, inside one of the buildings, I found exhausted students sprawled across furniture, surrounded by empty coffee cups and wrappers, clearly working on some sort of important project or midterm and hanging on to the anxiety of an all-nighter. The group decided to head back to Inman Park for lunch before the game. However, because we were eating during the in-between time of 3:30, the planned restaurant of Del Bar was closed. Blessing in disguise, because we ended up at Fritti, which had some of the best Italian food I've had outside of New York City. We sipped cocktails, the owner's midnight black dog almost attacked Quentin, our server told us about the city, and we bought tickets for the Hawks game. We squeezed 6 big dudes into the Nissan Rogue, while our driver kept the good vibes going with Afro-fusion music that sounded like it was streaming directly from the Bahamas. Back inside, Q made margaritas in the blender, Sammy got us beers that we shotgunned on the balcony, and we made our way to State Farm Arena. People were in fantastic spirits. It was HBCU night and there was a feeling of a college reunion in the stadium. We splurged for the lower bowl, close enough that we could truly appreciate the size of the players and hear Isaiah Stewart's tremendous body thudding up and down the court. Cade Cunningham had 29 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 6 3-pointers, and a block and a steal all in the first half. Trae Young didn't stand a chance. Then we were blessed with the David Banner halftime performance. He was visibly exhausted during his performance, but he played all the hits, so who could complain? The second half was just as exciting as the first. The Hawks made it interesting, tying the game in the final few minutes, but the Pistons handled business. It was an astonishingly high-scoring and conspicuously close to the 4.5-point spread, 143-148 Pistons. After the game, there was a mob of fans doing the wobble dance in the concourse, and Quentin seamlessly hopped in and joined them. We walked back to the Airbnb where we tried to recoup our gambling losses. Naturally, we bet T-Wolves, who lost 130-123 to the Thunder. I picked up Mediterranean takeout, which was underwhelming, but still better than Hudson Grill, where Q had gone to get wings. He was gone for 30 minutes and came back empty-handed. The server told him that they were out of wings after he'd been waiting at the bar for 20 minutes. Unfazed, he set off on a midnight Waffle House run with Blake and Sojat, only to be turned around because there was one employee inside handling a plethora of takeout orders. They settled for Taco Bell delivery. We rolled out of bed Monday morning, moving slowly from several days of excess. Thankfully, we were able to book a late checkout. Matt had left before most of us had woke up to visit his family in Chattanooga. By noon, the rest of us were piled up in another Nissan Rogue and heading to Cypress Street Pint and Plate in Midtown to grab lunch. Blake up front, making friends with the driver, Sojai and Andy comfortably in the second row seats checking the Monday night NBA slate, Sammy, Q, and I nestled together in the back row listening to Quentin hard at work in another teams meeting. We'd conquered the South, perhaps the Midwest was next. Cade Cunningham is pretty good, maybe we'll head to Detroit to see him, or maybe we'll see Giannis up close while he's still in his prime. Then again, there's an alien in Texas that people speak pretty highly of.